All right, looks like we are live. That's awesome. It has been a bit of a technical challenge with regard to getting this all set up today. Just trying to figure out workflow and all of that other stuff. So yeah, we'll give it a couple of seconds here to see who is popping on. One of the challenges I have is seeing who's on, who's online, and also any comments. So I'm going to be flipping back and forth. I'll have to play with some software here coming up. So if you can... There we go. All right. So I just typed in the link to our closed Facebook group. Just give it a couple more minutes. All sorts of technical difficulty. Sorry, just give it a few more minutes here. Just while I troubleshoot the usual. All right, we're going to get started regardless, even though I'm obviously, it's like a monkey looking at a freaking wristwatch right now. So, welcome to episode 19. So, have you ever wondered why Captain America has such loyal followers? Why he can lead so well? Well, the answer lies in a whole bunch of things, but what we're going to talk about is the real reason he can lead. And I get he's kind of fictional, but it has to do with values. So stay tuned to learn more. By the end of this episode, you'll have learned about the secret drawing power of what we call values. We'll talk about what they are, and personal and team values, and why you should figure out your own values to lead better. And so in the context of this episode, we'll be talking mostly around personal values, but in later episodes, we'll be discussing organizational values as well, and the importance of them. My name is Daryl Black, and I'm taking probably about 30 years of experience responding to emergencies and disasters, and taking those lessons I've learned and helping you apply them to your personal and professional lives. Before we get deep into it, a few announcements. First of all, obviously the podcast from last week, episode 18, is dropping tomorrow on YouTube, Facebook, and I'll be dropping also some clips onto Instagram and both my feed and also IG stories and LinkedIn and all of that stuff. So stay tuned for that. Now, last week I spoke about the fact that I was heading off to the Canadian Volunteer Fire Service Association conference in fantastic Nova Scotia, Canada. And I got to tell you, I was excited for the trip, and they did not disappoint. So there were 100 or 120 participants from all over the country, all volunteer, from fire services across Canada. And there were a number of speakers and a number of sessions. So I did a couple of them. I did one on crisis leadership, so more of a class kind of thing, and then also had the honor to do a guest speech keynote on the afternoon after of their AGM, and it was fantastic. I had a lot of good times there for sure, and maybe a bit of a hangover the day of my talk. But anyways, I digress. Now, that kind of is a good segue into what we're going to talk about, but I want to talk a little bit about the Canadian Volunteer Fire Service Association, CVFSA, and also associations in general. Now, you can tell the values of an organization, and we'll talk about that, and how much they value others by how they treat you. So when you show up, or even beforehand, are they well organized? Are they communicating with you? Do you know your requirement, or do they know your requirements? So PowerPoint, laptop, and all the logistics stuff. Do they have your room squared away? Are they clear about expenses and costs and all of those things? And I can tell you that without a doubt, Andrew and the rest of the crew and Paul, who are organizing, and Angela Dale, and the list goes on, people chipping in to help on this conference, I can tell you that I was treated extremely, extremely well, and in a manner befitting of their association for sure. Now, I do want to show, it's going to be a bit of prop time here, because I'm very, very proud of the organization that I helped out with. So let's see here. And again, I'll just get, it's the quality really is representative of the organization. So I got a picture, which is pretty awesome. So that was, and a certificate, which I don't have in front of me here, but so that was for presenting my topic on critical leadership or crisis leadership. And then for the speech, this one is going to go up on my wall for sure. And I don't know if you'll be able to see that very well, but anyways, so it is personalized. It's very, very phenomenal. I'm so deeply honored and privileged. Now, you also know an organization based on their based on their personality a little bit, and everywhere I go, they like to give a bit of something that's kind of local. So I am happy to say that I did get some chocolates, so for some fire department themed chocolates, so I appreciate that. But these are the things I'm really super excited about. Got some maple barbecue sauce there. So presumably that's local, so I appreciate that a great deal. And here it comes. So I have a Annapolis Cider Company glass, and the Annapolis Cider Company was just down the street from Acadia University where we were. And here it is. This is it right here. The conference organizers know me, and also they know their local areas and are supporting local business. So that's Annapolis Cider Company. So wanted to really thank the CVFSA for that. All right, so let's do a review. So leadership, to summarize or to define it, is social influences or social influence which maximizes the efforts of others to achieve a goal. Now, a connected leader, and that's ultimately where we're trying to go with everything. That's my message. This is where I want to take us from that old methodology, that old style of leadership, and apply it. And a self-aware leader, a connected leader is a self-aware leader that facilitates but doesn't dictate. One who leads through respect, not fear. One who leads with inspiration and not exasperation. One who is vulnerable, empathetic, compassionate, and calm, and expects the same of those around them. In summary, a connected leader is one who connects and then leads. We went on to talk about Leadership 2.0, and that is the model where previous models of leadership, especially in the environment I'm very familiar with, and that is emergency response and emergency management, where it used to be that the leader was at the pinnacle. So it was the leader up here, and then the entire team supports the leader. All the information feeds up. All of the authority lies with that individual. And if you can picture an organization is hundreds or dozens or hundreds or thousands, depending on the size, of all of these pinnacles led by a leader. And so, instead of boxes, we should probably draw them all like this. But Leadership 2.0 flips that model completely around. It takes this and it flips it around so that the leader is the one supporting the team. The leader is the one that's empowering the team. The leader is the one that's removing barriers. All of those things that are required day to day to help people, the team, do their jobs. We spoke about influence and the sources of influence. It starts with position and then it goes to respect, power, respect, influence, and a couple of ways that we could get it. So, the main way is by giving the respect first, and that's on you as a leader. You need to give the respect first, and then you will start to receive it. And there's a couple ways that you can go ahead and do that. One was the power paradox. And the power paradox unintuitively says that I get more influence by giving it away. I get more back when I give it away. And the reason for that is because then the power paradox, it empowers people. It tells them that you trust them. It tells them that you value them. It tells them that you respect them. And chances are when you go ahead and give the influence away, they're going to do a much, much, much better job than if you had micromanaged and stick-handled them through their paths. So keep that in mind, the power paradox. The second method of gaining respect is what we call the 2 questions of the connected leader. Okay, the 2 questions of the connected leader. First question is, what are you working on? Okay, what are you working on? And the second is, how can I help? What kind of support can I give you? So those are the 2 questions. What are you working on? How can I support you? So if you utilize the power paradox and you ask those 2 connected leader questions, start simple, you'll start to see your respect influence grow, and that by definition and by association, your leadership ability as well. So Captain America brought you here. But before we get into that conversation, we're going to talk about really the undercurrent or the underlying power, the underlying glue that keeps people coming back to leaders like Captain America, like Nelson Mandela, like all of these leaders. And that commonality, that common ground lies with what we call values. Now, we're not talking values with regard to values of like monetary values, like my house is valued at, or, the car is worth this. And this has nothing to do with monetary value. It has nothing to do with salaries. It has nothing to do with status. None of the above. What we're talking about are values which live on the inside and in our subconscious, and we'll talk about that. So what are values then if they're not monetary, if they're not status and all of the materialistic stuff? Well, values in simple terms are what you hold important to you. So what you think is important, essentially. And we're talking pretty broadly. We're not talking about, I think it's important that I, have a TV in my room, which I don't, but It's a horrible example. But we're talking very broad, more life kind of values, what we feel are important to us. So if you think of values maybe as a moral compass, and that sounds so self-righteous, doesn't it? And I don't mean it to be, but that's one of the things that you can think of values. But essentially, it's what you feel, what you hold dear in your heart, and what you feel is important. Now, chances are, when you've been happy in your life, or you've been happy at work, or you've been happy coaching, or you've been happy in a relationship, chances are there's a strong alignment with regard to your values. So there's a lot of energy associated with that as well, and we'll get into that in other episodes. But essentially, values really guide in terms of guide our happiness. And if we're not happy, and a lot of times we don't know exactly what it is, we're just kind of miserable, chances are there's a misalignment of values. So some examples of these values in action as parents. If you think about it, in your parenting journey, and you're a leader as a parent, what are some things that you want your kids to feel are important? All right. So what are some things that you're trying to instill in your child that you think is important? And chances are those are things that you feel important. So I'm not sure if the tech is going to work here, but if you're on board, can you just go ahead and comment, and let's see what are some examples of some things that you're trying to instill in your kids that that you want. So I'll type something in. I also recognize that there's a bit of a delay here. All right. So yeah, we've got things like respect. We've got work ethic, a good work ethic. Be a good example. Essentially for me, for my son Hunter, it's the ability to contribute to society. And I think that if we're all giving more into society than we're taking out, then life and society will really be a good place. So some other examples, there's accountability, positivity, honesty, integrity, service to others, and the list goes on. And in fact, when I publish this episode, I'll leave a list of values for you to pick through. So now that we've talked about what values are, the next question is pretty obvious, whereby where do we get values from? You know, we're not necessarily, they're not necessarily conscious, and in fact, they're not. So if you haven't guessed it, yep, our parents or parent, whatever the case might be. So that is where we get our values from. And if you think about it, there were certainly some things that were non-negotiable with my parents, for example. So something like every Sunday night was 6 o'clock supper, period. Like my brother and I were pretty busy, really busy, and doing sports and all sorts of things like that. But it was non-negotiable, Sunday at 6 p.m., supper around the table. Now, you would think of that as maybe that's just a rule, or that's just kind of an arbitrary thing just to get everybody around and all of that. But from a values perspective, my parents knew they valued family time. They valued the ability to reconnect at least even once a week. So that's an example of values in action. So why do we even need to pay attention to values? Like, why do they matter? Well, the reality is they are our personal code of conduct. So they provide a guidance in the absence of clear direction. So if you are faced with something on the personal level and there isn't a hard and fast answer to it, maybe there's a multitude of answers. One of the things you can do is sit with that decision and see where it settles and how you feel about it. Now, when I talk about feeling it, it's really feeling where it lies within your value set. Now, yes, there are some times when you have an ethical dilemma where there's multiple values at play here. But really, when you're talking about values, that's why they sit here. And that's why some of the decisions are like friggin' heart-wrenching. Like they're hard to do because they sit right here. So they provide that guidance in the absence of clear direction, and they form your personal code of conduct. Now, leadership-wise, leadership and values, taking that same definition or that same reason, that personal code of conduct, that giving you guidance in the absence of clear direction, we can absolutely apply that to leadership. So your values will dictate how you interact with others, how you handle adversity. Are you negative or are you positive? Do you see opportunity or do you see danger? You'll know what to do when the path isn't crystal clear. So if you're faced with something that's not in the policy manual, well, then you can go back to your values and maybe your organizational values, and that will guide the direction by which you're going to go. Now, if you have strong alignment with regard to your values and, say, your organization, you're going to be a lot happier at work. But sometimes there's a misalignment where your corporation is doing one thing that maybe on a personal level you don't necessarily agree with. And therefore that's going to cause friction or challenges and unhappiness at work or in the family or in any relationship. So it's important for us to recognize that values really are connectors. They're a personal code of conduct. They are a playbook when we don't really have clear direction. So now that we know what they are and how important they are, how do you go about defining them? Because we all have values, and chances are we haven't defined them to the point where we can actually articulate them. So we couldn't maybe put them on a piece of paper. But that's going to change after this episode, by the way. So one of the things to start the process of defining what your value is, defining what your values are, what you feel are important to you, is think about when you were the happiest. Now that could be at work, it could be in a team environment, maybe that's sports related, maybe that's family related, something like that. When were you most fulfilled? When did you not have a pit in your stomach? When did you feel light? When did you feel expansive? Well, think about that time. Think about the work you were doing, the atmosphere around you, your leader, your partner, your team, your family situation, all of those things. Think about that. And now what you can start to do is determine your values, because chances are whatever you were doing, whoever you were with, if you were truly happy and expansive, there was a strong alignment of values. Whatever you were doing aligned with your values. Whatever you were doing was very much in line with what you feel is important. So that's the first step, is just getting present in your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings with regard to values. So let's look at some actual examples here. So the Canadian Volunteer Fire Association, Fire Service Association I just talked about. If anyone has been around firemen and firewomen, firefighters before, you know that it is absolutely a worldwide brother and sisterhood for sure. And I teach all over the place, and I see it time and time again. It doesn't matter if you go to the United States or all over Canada. Firefighters have have the ability to see each other and be long lost friends. They go into fire halls that they've never been into before, and they'll have supper with somebody. No questions asked. And you know what? There is, in fact, that's to be encouraged, for example. It doesn't matter where you are. So when we go to a conference in Nova Scotia, there's people I've never met. There's people that are from all over the country, all sorts of socioeconomic, different locations and demographics. And they can come in, 110 people, and bond like nobody's business. We can go out for supper, and there's no awkwardness. There's no peacocking. There's no ego. There's none of that kind of stuff. It's so interesting to me to see that. And the reason for that is because the values that cause people to go into emergency services, they're all the same. They're all the same. respect for others, wanting to serve others, values around teamwork, values around strong work ethic, doing a good job. Those are just, small number of values. And so you'd have those values, they all come together, just like long lost brothers and sisters. Now, in my own situation, apart from the CVFSA, I belong to a bunch of emergency response organizations, and the teams that really get it, particularly on the volunteer side, the teams that really get it, the teams that really mesh, the teams that are really effective, have a strong sense of values or the same values amongst the members. So just like with the CVFSA and a conference across the country, we as a team can come together, deal with some pretty interesting stuff that would stress out most other people, but really our sense of team is so strong, and our sense of brotherhood and sisterhood is so strong that there are members I've never met. They've gone through similar training and things like that, but maybe I've never met them. And then we go deploy and we're working, bam, like 1,000 miles an hour, no issues, no ego, none of those things. And we actually enjoy doing it. We enjoy working with each other, and we enjoy doing the job because the job aligns so closely with our values. And one of my values is service to others. So like I said, even with my son, if we can contribute, put more into society than we take out, I think the world will be a better place. So that does bring us to Captain America. All right. Yep. And I get he is not real. He is fictional. But I do want to say that he has cups and all sorts of toys and everything named after him. And there's even a little Lego thing. Speaking of my son there, that's Captain America. This is his... this one was his Infinity War because he's got his beard and that bad shield. But anyways. All right, so let's talk about Captain America and why he can influence others, why he can be such a strong and powerful leader, and why he has such a strong fan following too as well. It's because he exhibits values that resonate or are in alignment with ours. So for example, he values loyalty. So loyalty to his teammates, loyalty to his mission. Integrity. The dude oozes integrity. And integrity is doing the right thing, even if nobody is watching. So it's staying true to yourself. So that is a value. And obviously Captain America has that. Honesty. So honesty is something that if you're asked a question, you're going to be honest about it. You're not going to lie, which is a little bit different than integrity, even though we think of integrity and honesty oftentimes one and the same. And huge respect for his team and his teammates and the rest of the world for that matter. So he has very, very strong values. So even as a fan watching, it resonates. Knowing full well he's a fictional character, there is a lot of alignment. There's a lot of loyalty towards a fictional character. So that goes to show that you can demonstrate and portray values, and it bridges a gap. It brings people a lot closer together. And the list goes on and on. We can talk about Superman if you want. We can talk about Batman's values if you want. But suffice to say, values can actually it's a double-edged sword. Values can be used to bring a team and individuals together in alignment. Or conversely, a conflict of values can tear a team apart or cause an individual or relationships maybe to splinter a little bit. So values in action, the importance of establishing them. I have a personal story here. 2011, I was teaching in Australia, teaching leadership to a whole bunch of folks with various fire services. And I was coming home. I'd been gone for about 6 weeks, I think it was. And so I log into the Sydney airport at the McDonald's, and my flight's leaving the next morning. And my emails like blowing up. Slave Lake. So Slave Lake was on fire, quite literally. Now, I mentioned a team I belong to, and it's a team that responds to these kinds of emergencies and disasters all over our province. And I went into emergency mode. I'm like, holy shoot. All right. And so, right away, the emails are coming in. Daryl, you gotta help us. You gotta deploy with us. We're leaving at this time, and we're going for 2 weeks, so on and so forth. So I go into like crisis mode. I'm like, yep, sounds good. I'm emailing back. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be landing in 12 hours or 14 hours, whatever the number is. Somebody pick me up. Let's go to Slave Lake and let's go save some lives and let's go help a bunch of people, because that was a strong value for me, right? Service to others. So we're in logistics mode, and I phone home, and I get that we don't phone home anymore, but like this. But and so my partner at the time, I said, yeah, I hear the Slave Lake's burning. It's really, really bad. And my partner and I said, here's the plan. I'm going to get into the airport, and they're going to pick me up and all sorts of stuff. Well, here's the interesting thing was my partner at the time, she said, well, you do know you've been gone for 6 weeks, right? And this is the most important part of this particular story. Right at that moment, literally in that moment, with that statement, I decided I didn't want to go, that now was not a good time. Now, it's not one of those BS things where, the partner said I shouldn't go, because she was fully supportive. But I decided right then and there, crystal clear, that I wouldn't deploy, that I wouldn't go to Slave Lake and be with my teammates. And the reason I was able to do that, the reason I was able to make that decision and be 1,000,000% okay with it, where it settled me right down, the reason for that was because I had clearly defined what my values were. And family is a very, very strong value. And in this particular case, it just took a little tweak, a little reminder for me to just put that value back in alignment, back into its place, which was at the top. And as a result, I didn't deploy. I did not deploy to Slave Lake, and I've had similar situations throughout. Now, there are times when, just the reality of a situation says, I'm going to subjugate, I'm going to put that value just down a little bit for necessity, but I'll tell you, that is the exception. Sure as hell ain't the rule. So the takeaway for you from this week's episode is jot down a handful of values. Think about them at the very least. I talked about when you're happiest, both in a relationship or maybe at work or doing a particular job or mission. Think about that, and think in particular about the ones that expanded you, that didn't constrict you or didn't cause you to contract, but made you actually feel lighter, made you feel more creative, made you feel more innovative, more relaxed. Think about that, and then put that into the context of values. Because as we said, that enlightenment, that expansion is largely because your values are in alignment with what you're doing or who you're with or whatever the case is. So feel that first. Think about that. And then jot 2 or 3 of them down. We don't need a long list. And again, I'll post a list in the podcast and the show notes for next week. But, we're not talking about an exhaustive list, just 1 or 2. Just start there. Now, call to action. We've got a couple things. Obviously, subscribe to the podcast. There's one dropping tomorrow. That's from last week's live. But we're on Apple and Google and I think SoundCloud as well. So that's one. But then also, please join our Facebook group. We're getting close to getting the critical mass of numbers that I wanted in my mind. But please, let's go ahead and push us over the top. I'll open the doors and we'll deep dive into more conversations that we wouldn't get into here on the podcast. So I'll leave you with this around being a connected leader. Don't just be a manager or just a leader. Be a connected leader. Influence through respect, not fear. Lead with inspiration, not desperation. Be self-aware. Facilitate, don't dictate. Be vulnerable and expect vulnerability back. Be empathetic and expect empathy. And be compassionate. That includes self-compassion and expect compassion back. Be calm. Manage the stress of yourself and those around you and expect calmness around you. In summary, a connected leader is one who connects first and then leads. Next episode, we're going to talk more about the fact that you could be really stifling your team. You could be stifling your relationship. Maybe if you're in a senior position, you could be stifling your agency. It's a concept that I call leader as a lid. So we're going to dive into that, and I think you'll be glad you spent some time there. Now remember to subscribe and comment and share, and we will absolutely see you next week.